Forget the intro. Here it is. Number 7. The discrete time crystal. The clock that never winds down. According to the second law of thermodynamics, every closed system in our universe must eventually succumb to entropy. This is the comforting interpretation of the natural order. Things wear out, heat dissipates, and motion eventually stops. We used to think that perpetual motion was a physical impossibility, a violation of the fundamental symmetry of time. Standard models tell us that if you don't keep kicking a system, it will settle into a state of static equilibrium. But on November 30th, 2021, a team led by researchers at Stanford University and Google Quantum AI, including Vedika Kamani, used the Sycamore quantum processor to build something that shouldn't exist. They found a phase of matter that repeats its structure in time. Using 20 superconducting qubits, they created a system that flipped back and forth indefinitely without absorbing a single joule of energy. The initial reaction from the scientific community was pure clinical disbelief. According to the principle of time translation symmetry, the laws of physics should remain the same at every moment. This structure breaks that law. It chooses its own rhythm, independent of the universe. The math doesn't add up because the qubits flipped every 2 laser pulses, a phenomenon known as period doubling. There is no known mechanism in classical physics that allows a system to resist thermalization. The data showed the qubits were stuck in a permanent loop of motion without energy cost. Imagine you are standing in a room with a pendulum. You watch it swing for a minute, an hour, a century. It never slows down. You touch it, trying to steal its momentum, but it just keeps ticking against your palm with a cold, rhythmic defiance. You realize the pendulum isn't moving because of gravity or a spring. It's moving because it has broken the flow of time itself. It is like watching a heartbeat in a body that has been dead for 1,000 years. But it gets worse. In 2024, researchers at TU Delft University created a time crystal that lasted for 40 minutes, millions of times longer than previous iterations. This means we are no longer looking at a fleeting quantum fluke, but a structure that could outlast the coherence of the universe. If a system can stay in motion without energy, then the heat death of the universe might not be the end. Could it be that the vacuum of space is already filled with these ghost structures, ticking away in the dark? If you were to be trapped in a room made of time crystalline material, you would experience a sensory nightmare. You would watch the walls pulse with a light that never dims, following a rhythm that ignores your presence. You would try to scream, but the sound waves would hit a structure that refuses to absorb their energy. You are alone with a machine that has no off switch, a structure that will be ticking long after your atoms have scattered to the void. These crystals are the first cracks in the wall of thermodynamics. They prove that entropy is not a king, but a landlord, and some structures have figured out how to live rent-free. We are explorers who just found a clock that doesn't need a battery, ticking in a universe we thought was running out of time. Number 6. The two-dimensional supersolid. The rigid ghost. In standard physics, we divide matter into neat boxes. A solid is a rigid lattice where atoms are locked in place. A liquid is a fluid state where atoms flow freely. This is a baseline reality. You can't have both at once. A brick doesn't flow through a pipe, and water doesn't hold a crystalline shape while it's pouring. This distinction is the safety net that keeps our houses from dissolving and our oceans from shattering. But in 2021, a team led by Francesca Ferlano at the University of Innsbruck achieved a breakthrough that shattered this boundary. They used magnetic atoms of dysprosium, cooled to a few billionths of a degree above absolute zero, to create a two-dimensional supersolid. They found a state of matter where the atoms were simultaneously locked into a crystalline grid and flowing with zero friction. Researchers watched as the droplets of atoms self-organized into a pattern that was both a structure and a void. According to the principles of superfluidity, a substance can only flow without resistance if its particles are delocalized. However, a solid requires atoms to be exactly localized in a grid. This structure violates both definitions. The data showed that each individual atom existed in every droplet of the crystal at the same time. The math says this is impossible. You cannot have a spatial periodic density and global phase coherence in the same particles. It breaks the one state per atom intuition. Imagine you are holding a cold, heavy iron bar. It feels solid, unyielding. But then you tilt it, and the internal mass of the iron begins to pour out of the ends like water, while the bar in your hand remains perfectly intact. You'd feel the weight shifting, the surface vibrating with the flow of a liquid that isn't there. You'd know, with a sudden dread, that the floor beneath you could do the same. It's as if a mountain decided to flow like a river without losing its peak. But it gets worse. The real impossibility came when the team observed vortices, tiny whirlpools of nothing, forming in the gaps between the droplets. In a normal liquid, a whirlpool is made of matter. In a supersolid, these vortices are quantized signatures of a ghost flow that exists between the atoms. This means the structure is essentially haunted by its own fluidity. If we can create 2D supersolids, we might be looking at matter that can bypass any barrier, a solid wall you could walk through. If you were to try and swim in a pool of supersolid matter, You would experience a visceral horror. You would feel the jagged edges of crystals scraping against your skin, yet there would be no resistance to your movement. You would be moving through a solid, but your hands would find nothing to push against. The water would be a series of frozen spikes that offer no buoyancy. You are sinking through a material that is too rigid to breathe and too fluid to hold you. These supersolids are a paradox written in the language of atoms. They prove that our definitions of solid and liquid are just human labels for a reality that is far more terrifying than we imagined. We are surface dwellers who think we know what a thing is, but the supersolid tells us that matter is a ghost wearing a crystal mask. Number 5. The negative mass fluid, the inverse reality. According to Newton's second law of motion, phi equal toma, if you push an object, it moves away from you. This is the fundamental rule of cause and effect that allows us to walk and drive. For decades, we have lived in a world where mass is always a positive value. It is a predictable law. If you apply force to the right, acceleration goes to the right. In the field of classical mechanics, a negative mass is a mathematical error. But in 2017, physicists at Washington State University, WCU, led by Peter Engels, created a fluid that behaves as if its mass is negative. They used lasers to supercool rubidium atoms into a Bose-Einstein condensate Beck measuring less than 100 microns across. Then, they used a second set of lasers to kick the atoms. When the rubidium was released, it didn't expand outward. It hit an invisible wall and flew back toward the source of the push. According to the principle of inertia, this shouldn't happen because it violates how matter responds to energy. When the WSU team applied force to push the fluid, the negative effective mass caused the atoms to accelerate backward, hitting the laser walls harder the more they were pushed. The math shows a negative curvature in the energy momentum graph. There is no known mechanism in daily experience that accounts for an object that gains speed in the opposite direction of a shove. Imagine you are trying to push a heavy door open. You lean your weight into it, bracing your feet. But instead of opening, the door suddenly flies toward you, pinning you against the wall with the exact amount of force you used to push it. You'd feel a sickening vertigo as you realize the harder you struggle, the tighter the door crushes you. You'd know that every move you make will be used against you by the atoms of the object. It's as if the world has become an inverse trap. Even more unsettling is the self-trapping phenomenon. Because the fluid accelerates backward, it can trap itself in space, creating shock waves and solitons that defy dissipation. This means a structure of negative mass could, in theory, accelerate to the speed of light simply by being pushed by a normal mass, with the two objects chasing each other forever. Could it be that the dark energy pushing our universe apart is just a massive structure of this inverse matter? If you were to be submerged in a tank of negative mass fluid, the horror would be absolute. You would try to kick to the surface, but every kick would pull you deeper into the dark. You would reach for the side of the tank, and your hands would be repelled by the surface you're trying to grab. You are trapped in a liquid that translates your desire for survival into a death sentence. There is no escape, because every action produces the exact opposite result. This rubidium fluid is a warning from the quantum basement. It proves that the laws of motion are only suggestions that apply to the matter we can see. We are children playing with blocks, unaware that some blocks are designed to explode when you try to stack them. The universe is not a playground. It is an inverse mirror. Number 4. The strange metal, the infinite chaos. In standard solid-state physics, Fermi liquid theory tells us how electrons behave inside a metal. We think of them as a gas of individual particles, following predictable paths. This is a baseline reality. As you heat a metal, resistance increases because the electron gas becomes more chaotic. For decades, we believed there was a limit to this chaos. A Planckian limit where electrons can't scatter any faster. It's a comforting ceiling that keeps our electronics from melting under quantum noise. But in research published in 2024 by teams at the Flatiron Institute, scientists have been obsessed with strange metals. These are materials found in high-temperature superconductors, where resistivity remains perfectly linear with temperature. They found that these metals violate the Fermi liquid model entirely. There are no individual electrons here. Instead, the entire structure acts as a single entangled soup of quantum entanglement. The resistance isn't caused by electrons hitting impurities, but by the fabric of reality itself being unable to process movement any faster. According to the principle of quasiparticles, we should be able to describe current as a flow of individual units of charge. But in a strange metal, the math doesn't add up because the scattering rate hits the absolute maximum allowed by physics, gamma prox kBt h bar. This is the Planckian limit. The violation is that the metal seems to have lost its particles. There is no known mechanism that allows a material to be this efficient at being chaotic. The metal has essentially surrendered its individuality to a collective vibration. Imagine you are looking at a crowd in a train station. Normally, you can see individuals moving, but in a strange metal station, the people have melted together into a single pulsing mass of flesh that fills the building. There are no individuals, only a collective vibration. You'd feel the floor humming with a frequency that is too fast for the room. You'd know that if you stepped into that crowd, you wouldn't just be pushed, you would be dissolved into the soup. But it gets worse. Researchers have found that these strange metals are locally critical, meaning every atom is at a tipping point between phases. This creates a state of maximal entanglement, where every electron is aware of every other electron in the entire wire. If you change the spin of one atom in a strange metal in New York, the soup in London feels it instantly. This breaks the locality of classical physics. The structure isn't a thing. It's a single quantum event masquerading as a piece of copper. If you were to hold a rod of strange metal, you would experience a personal horror. You wouldn't feel the heat. You would feel the vibration of the entanglement. Because your body is made of electrons and the metal is an entanglement sponge, the structure would begin to pull your own atoms into its soup. You would look down and see your fingers beginning to blur, not from movement, but from loss of individuality. You are becoming part of the circuit, a quasi-particle being deleted by the Planckian limit. Strange metals are the black holes of materials science. They prove that at high enough energies, the individual is an illusion. We are just temporary ripples in a quantum ocean that is waiting to pull us back into the chaos. The wire isn't carrying electricity, it's carrying the end of the world as we know it. Number 3, the Pauli engine, the pressure of nothing. According to classical thermodynamics, an engine requires a temperature difference to do work. You heat gas, it expands, and it pushes a piston. This is the Carnot cycle, the principle that has powered every engine since the Industrial Revolution. This is a safe reality, no heat, no work. For decades, we believed that at absolute zero, all engines must stop because there is no thermal energy left to harvest. It's the ultimate off switch for the universe. But in 2023, researchers at the University of Kaiserslautern-Landau, led by Arturo Idera, built a quantum engine that doesn't use heat. They used a gas of lithium -6 atoms and exploited the Pauli exclusion principle. They found they could generate work simply by changing the identity of the atoms. By turning bosons into fermions, they forced the atoms to stack into higher energy levels because fermions are forbidden from occupying the same state. This quantum pressure pushed the system with more force than any fire. According to the standard model, pressure comes from atoms bouncing off walls due to thermal velocity. But the Pauli pressure in this engine comes from a mathematical rule, not heat. This structure violates the classical requirement for a heat bath. The data showed that the Pauli engine could reach an efficiency that ignores the Carnot limit. Physics says you can't have a pressure increase without a temperature increase. But here, the temperature stayed near zero while the pressure skyrocketed. It is work being done by pure math. Imagine you are in a small, empty room. Suddenly, you feel a crushing pressure against your chest, as if the room is filling with invisible bricks. There is no wind, no heat, no sound. But the walls are closing in because the nothingness in the room has decided it needs more space. You'd feel your bones beginning to snap under the weight of a geometric rule. You'd know that no matter how much you scream, there is no air to push back. It is like being crushed by the logic of a sentence. The horror deepens when you realize the implications. This Pauli pressure is the only thing that keeps neutron stars from collapsing into black holes. It is a force of pure math, stronger than gravity. By building a Pauli engine, we have learned how to harness the thing that stops the universe from imploding. But if we can use this exclusion to do work, what happens when we reverse it? If we could turn off the Pauli principle locally, matter would simply cease to have volume. If you were to be the piston in a Pauli engine, the experience would be terrifyingly silent. You wouldn't hear a roar. You would simply feel the logic of the universe pushing you away. Your own atoms, being fermions, would be repelled by the Pauli state of the engine with a force that defies chemical bonds. You are being deleted from a space because the math says you don't fit there. There is no rescue because the force is coming from the laws of reality itself. The Pauli engine is a machine that runs on the no of the universe. It proves that the void is actually a crowded room, and we are only allowed to exist because the atoms have agreed to stay in their own seats. We are guests in a house where the furniture is held apart by a mathematical stay-away order. Number 2, the Majorana bound state, the self-eating particle. According to the standard model, every particle has an antiparticle. An electron has a positron. If they meet, they annihilate. This is a fundamental symmetry that prevents the universe from disappearing. We used to think matter and antimatter were separate ledgers, and you could never have a particle that was both. It's the ultimate either-or. You are either here or you are the whole where you used to be. This symmetry is the backbone of our existence. But in 2025, researchers at TU Delft, including Bastian Hoff, announced a milestone in creating Majorana-bound states. Using a series of quantum dots, they engineered a structure where an electron was split across two locations. They found a quasiparticle that is its own antiparticle. It is a half electron that exists at both ends of a nanowire simultaneously, but if you look for it in the middle, there is nothing. It is a particle that is haunting its own existence. According to the Dirac equation, a fermion must be distinct from its antiparticle. This structure violates that rule by being its own mirror image. The data showed a zero bias peak in electrical conductance, a signature that the particle has exactly zero energy and zero charge at its core, yet still exists in the material's wave function. The math doesn't add up for a real object. It's a topological ghost. There is no mechanism in classical chemistry that allows a single unit of matter to be halved and pinned to opposite ends. Imagine you are looking into a mirror. Usually, you see your reflection. But then, you reach out, and the reflection's hand is solid. You pull your reflection out, and you realize you and the reflection are the same person split in half. You'd feel a chilling emptiness in your chest, knowing that if you ever touched your other half, you would simply cease to have ever existed. You are half of a person walking through a world that only recognizes wholes. But it gets worse. Because these Majorana states are topologically protected, they are immune to any local disturbance. You can heat them or poke them, and the half particle won't budge. This means they remember their history in a way that regular matter cannot. If you braid these particles, swapping their positions, they change the phase of the entire system without moving an atom. It means we have created a structure that is aware of its own past, a particle with a memory. If you were to be encoded into a Majorana-bound state, you would experience a nightmare of isolation. You would feel yourself stretched across a vast distance, aware of yourself at point A and point B, but with a total void where your heart should be. You would see the world moving around you, but you would be protected from it. Nothing could touch you. You are a memory of a person pinned to the ends of a universe that has forgotten how to put you back together. Majorana states are the zombies of the quantum world. They prove that the line between something and nothing is a lie. We are just holes made of halves that are waiting to find their other side and disappear. The universe isn't built of blocks, it's built of voids that have forgotten they are empty. Number 1, the forbidden geometry. In the standard field of crystallography, there is a law called the crystallographic restriction theorem. It tells us that crystals can only have certain symmetries, like threefold or fourfold. You can tile a floor with squares, but never with pentagons without leaving gaps. This is a baseline reality. The universe's internal geometry follows rigid, repeating rules. For decades, we believed that 5-fold forbidden symmetries were mathematically impossible in nature. It was a comforting limit on the atomic world. But in 2021, a discovery by Luca, Bindi, and Paul Steinhardt changed everything. They analyzed red trinitite, a glassy material formed during the first atomic bomb test in 1945. They found a quasicrystal with icosahedral symmetry, a structure that is ordered but never repeats. It was formed in the literal heart of a nuclear explosion, a fusion of sand and copper born from the madness of the Trinity test. It is a structure that was born from the end of the world, following a geometry that shouldn't exist here. According to the laws of periodicity, a crystal must have a unit cell that repeats. This structure violates that law. It has a 5-fold symmetry that follows the golden ratio in its spacing, meaning it is ordered infinitely but never identical to itself. The math says this structure is actually a 3D shadow of a 6-dimensional crystal. There is no known mechanism in geology that can create this. It requires the pressure and temperatures found only in the heart of a nuclear blast. Imagine you are walking through a forest where every tree is perfectly spaced. But as you look closer, you realize no 2 trees are the same distance apart, yet the forest feels perfectly arranged. You'd feel a sense of wrongness in your vision as your brain tries to find the pattern that isn't there. You'd know that the forest isn't part of your world. It's a 3D projection of a higher dimensional nightmare. It is like looking at a 2D drawing of a cube and realizing the cube is looking back. But it gets worse. These structures are impossible for us to understand because we are flatland creatures. If a quasicrystal is a shadow of a 6D object, then the atoms we see are just the tips of a structure extending into dimensions we can't perceive. This means the 1945 explosion didn't just melt sand. It ripped a hole into a higher dimensional geometry, leaving behind a fossil of a reality that doesn't follow our rules. We have accidentally invited a 6D visitor into our 3D prison. If you were to be crystallized into a quasicrystal, the horror would be existential. You would feel your body arranged into a perfect icosahedral pattern. You would be ordered, but you would never find rest because your pattern would never repeat. You would be a shadow of yourself, stretched across 6 dimensions while trapped in 3. You would look at your hands and see a forbidden symmetry that the universe's grid was never designed to hold. You are a glitch that has become permanent. The Trinity quasicrystal is a monument to our own destruction. It proves that when we break the atoms of our world, we don't just release energy, we release a geometry that was never meant to be seen. We are architects who've accidentally opened a door to a house with 6-dimensional walls. The universe is a house built on foundations that are surprisingly easy to break if you have enough cold, enough pressure, or enough madness. We are surface dwellers, naming the ripples while ignoring the depth of the ocean beneath us. These structures are proof that reality is just a thin skin over a quantum void. Okay, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do.